And again, so what I'm trying to convince you of is not only to not just do a podcast. Podcasts are great, but the benefit of why podcasts are specifically what you should focus on. Today, we're talking about kind of hustling smarter and not harder. And kind of the person I want to focus on is this man right here, Gary Vaynerchuk. You've probably seen him around on social media. If you don't know who he is, you might still know his face. But I want to start off with this quote here, which is, when I hear people debate the ROI of social media, it makes me remember why so many businesses fail. Most businesses are not playing the marathon, they're playing the sprint. They're not worried about lifetime value and retention. They're worried about short-term goals. And I want to encourage everyone, again, kind of to remind everyone, it's not going to be an overnight success thing. Again, Fred, you can probably attest to this. You said, I think, 250 episodes at this point. It doesn't come overnight. Success does not, with social media, is not going to be, hey, I put out an episode and tomorrow I have 1 million followers. Not going to be the case. But the value that social media and a social media presence is going to play in the long run, especially now, is huge. And it's going to, you're going to keep people's attention, and you want to keep people's attention. You want people to come back. You don't want them to buy your product or your service and then leave forever. You want them to buy your product and service and stick around. And that's really the core of social media, is giving people value so that they continue to stick around and learn what you're doing, and get interested in what you're doing and what your company is about. So first off, I think personally, for small business owners, really for any business owner that is busy and has a full day, podcasts are the solution to your social media. My company is obviously called Podcast by Joe. We focus on podcasts, but we create a lot of different content. But here's why I think podcasts are the solution. First off, they're time efficient. They're so easy to do. You can sit down in a Zoom call, for example, like we're doing right now, and you can talk for 15 to 30 minutes and you're done. It's very, very time efficient. You don't have to have a big production team. You don't have to have a lot of things going on. It's very quick. And that's a huge plus for business owners that just feel like they don't have time to worry about their social media. I'm telling you, you probably do. Second, you can knock out every bird with one stone. And I'm going to kind of hit on that later, what I kind of mean by that. But pretty much what you can get out of a podcast is everything, or all social media pieces. You can check every check mark with one piece of content. And then third, you can do it by yourself. You don't need a team. Like I was saying earlier, you can sit in front of your laptop with a small microphone or even your computer mic and talk for 30 minutes. It's not difficult to do by yourself. All you need is just a mic and a computer. Every single person on here has both a mic and a computer. And so, pretty much everyone is able to do something like this by themselves. You don't need a guest. Guests are great, but you don't need one. People have different types of podcasts. Before we go on, a little bit about me. I've been producing podcasts for about 5 years. I've worked with people such as Damon John from Shark Tank, Robert Kiyosaki, who wrote Rich Dad Poor Dad, and one of my bosses, or used to be a boss of mine, Anik Singhal. Anik runs a company here called Learn. He's in the entrepreneurial space. He sells courses online for entrepreneurs, and I was blessed to be able to work for him. And I begged him to start a podcast. I was hired as an affiliate manager, actually, from a company that I was working for before. But about 6 months in, for about 6 months, I was begging him to let me start a podcast. Anik finally was like, fine, you can start a podcast, but you need to show me that it's beneficial, because he didn't want me to be wasting my time and he didn't want to waste his time. Very similar arguments to many business owners. They're just like, I don't know why I should be doing this. Again, he already had 1 million followers on Facebook and stuff, but they weren't really interacting with him very much. His social, like, he'd put out a post and maybe get 1,000 views on it. So we started this podcast called The Fighting Entrepreneur, and I worked on it for about 6 months. And in those 6 months, I was able to help grow it to about 750,000 downloads, which is pretty dang good for one episode a week. And we had guests, again, similar to Robert Kiyosaki. We had people like Damon John came to our office one time, and he said he listened to it all the time. It was super, super cool. And, you know, we grew it, and we saw people listening to it. And I was in charge of everything about it. I was in charge of the recording, the editing, the publishing, the marketing, the branding, a lot of the content I had to come up with as well. Pretty much all Onik did was host. And so, you know, I really learned a lot and grew a lot in the side of marketing. From before that, I'd really thought, well, you should have a podcast because it's a podcast. But afterwards, I kind of think of podcasts as in a completely different light now. Podcasts are not to be recorded, published, and then done with. The level of content that we were creating was incredible. And that's one of the reasons we were able to grow it so big, so fast. So that's kind of what I want to hit on today. But I'm not going to focus on Onik. Today I'm going to focus on Gary Vaynerchuk. Again, a little bit about him. Gary Vaynerchuk, if you have ever heard of him, he has a podcast called the GaryVee Experience. He runs a company called VaynerMedia. They do a lot of advertising for people like Hulu and Ford and a lot of AAA companies. And he is constantly on your Facebook feed or your Instagram feed or your LinkedIn feed telling you to hustle, hustle, hustle. People need to work harder, and people need to take advantage of social media. And I would agree to an extent. Now, again, the title of this is Hustle Smarter, Not Harder. One thing that GaryVee has that a lot of us don't is GaryVee has a massive production team that is working around the clock to create content. GaryVee is putting out a YouTube video every single week, or every day, every single week, 5 days a week. He is putting out micro content, which is all over your Facebook and your Instagram and your LinkedIn. And that's really how most people know him. Some people don't even know what he does. They just see him on Facebook and they know they know his face. But it's always, you know, title at the top and then him speaking for about 30 seconds to 2 minutes about something that he believes with a specific topic in mind. He is creating podcasts. He has the GaryVee Experience, and then he has a few other smaller podcasts that he works with, and he does an episode every single day, sometimes two. He does Facebook Live events. He does a Facebook Live every single morning where he'll ask, you know, fans of his or people that just have questions to come on, and he'll interview actual people and just kind of give them advice on what they should be doing differently. He does one every single day. He also has a blog post every single day. He has a Twitter. He is tweeting all day, but he at least has one Twitter post a day. He does a LinkedIn live event as well, very similar to his Facebook Live. And he does 100 pieces of content every day. Now, first off, a lot of people see this. I see this, and I get very, very scared because I'm like, there's no way ever, unless I had a massive production team, that I can ever come close to 100 pieces of content every single day. That's 3,000 posts or 3,000 pieces of content every single month. That is nuts. Most businesses that you see, especially small businesses, have maybe one post a day, and it's usually a link to like a blog post or something. It's not anything crazy. It's not anything super special. He is doing 100 pieces of different content every single day. And I'm here to tell you that he is hustling like crazy, but you can do pretty much the exact same thing with just 30 minutes. And that's where I come back to podcasts. Why podcasts? Why do I think that you should do podcasts? Again, it's time efficient. You spend 15 to 30 minutes recording a podcast. You sit down, you say, hey, you know, right before bed, you sit down, or right when you wake up, you sit down and you say, this is a problem I saw yesterday in my business. This is a problem I saw today in my business. This is a problem I saw last week in my business, and this is how we fixed it. Or this is a problem that I see in the world right now, and this is how I think we should fix it. It's very simple. And then again, it's easy to do on your own. You can do it right when you wake up. You can do it right before you go to bed, and you don't need anyone else there. You can do it by yourself. You can do it quickly by yourself. And so now I'm going to come to the sunflower method, which I have called it. And this is kind of the part where I convince you that the a podcast is where you want to start when it comes to social media. Podcasts, again, are what I focus on, and I recommend all business owners do first. But content creation is what is kind of the overarching theme of what I want people to have. You want a podcast, but if no one listens to your podcast, who cares? The idea of the sunflower method is you take some sort of, a sunflower, and the podcast is the big, like, black center, the big core of it. The podcast is pretty much the backbone of it, but it's the biggest part. If you had a sunflower by yourself and it was just the black part, it's not that great to look at. It's the petals and everything around it combining with the podcast that makes it interesting, that makes it enjoyable to look at, and that catches people's attention. And so that's where I kind of come to the sunflower method of the podcast is your core. We're going to hypothetically, for this example, say you record one 30-minute podcast. So you record one 30-minute podcast. That's the core of your social media. We say, hey, we want micro content. We want people to find it. We already have people on Facebook and Instagram and LinkedIn following us, but we don't on iTunes and Spotify because they don't know it exists. We want micro content. Hypothetically, you can get 15 2-minute videos out of one 30-minute podcast. Already, that is mind-blowing to a lot of people. That is 15 days of the month already covered with a social media post that is, first off, engaging to look at. It has great value, and you don't have to re-record anything. I've talked to a lot of business owners that say, yeah, we spend like an hour every week to record a 5-minute video about something for social media. Stop. Sit down, record a 30-minute podcast, and just edit it. Cut it into, again, hypothetically, you could get 15 2-minute videos out of this. You can shorten it, and you could get 31-minute videos. So that is already huge. Half of your social media for the month could technically already be covered. On top of that, you can do a YouTube video. You just post the whole thing on YouTube, especially people are using Zoom a lot right now, so you can just record the video on Zoom. You don't even necessarily need a camera, though. You can just repost the audio with a picture of your podcast art. So you have a YouTube video now. You have a podcast that is living on iTunes, Spotify, and everything. You have micro content on your social media, and you have a YouTube video. But we can keep going. You create a blog. Maybe you already have a blog. You can take your podcast. You can pretty much just rip the transcript. You get an audio transcript, and you just throw that on your blog, and it pretty much just wrote itself. Maybe a few little words are edited here and there, but your blog pretty much is already writing itself from 30 minutes of something that you did before, right before you went to bed. You have a full blog, you have a YouTube channel, and you have 15 posts every month. Continue. You do a Facebook Live event. One thing that is super cool about Facebook that they allow you to do this and kind of technology now is there's softwares that allow you to stream to Facebook instead of just Facebook itself, one being called OBS. And you can actually we used to do this all the time, and I still do this for a lot of people. You can take a pre-recorded podcast. So let's say you record a podcast and you edit it and you make it perfect, and you can put it into the software and almost fake a live event. It will look live. People will get a notification to their phone that says, hey, so-and-so is live on Facebook. But really all it is it's just your pre-recorded podcast that you took 30 minutes to record, and you are putting it as a Facebook Live on your Facebook page. And so now you have a Facebook Live event every, let's say, week or month or whatever, however much you record. You have a YouTube video, you have a blog post, you have 15 micro content posts. Continue. You get a Facebook watch party. Later that night, you just say, hey, we're going to watch the video that we already did today. We're going to watch it again. Why not? Might as well. You use the edited podcast again. Continue. Obviously, just a Facebook post. You do a Facebook post, you do a Twitter post, and you can do an Instagram story post. Instagram stories and Facebook stories are getting bigger and bigger you guys probably have seen them. If you have an Instagram feed, they're always at the very top. GaryVee is posting an Instagram story pretty much every hour because he wants to stay in front of you. He wants his Facebook or his Instagram story to be the first one you see. You can just take the micro content that you already have and just repost it on your story. And then, let's say you record one podcast a week. You get that 30-minute video. You put that YouTube video up. Well, what are you going to, if you want more content, let's say we want to keep going. You want more content. What about the other 6 days of the week? Let's take that podcast, that 30-minute podcast, and we edit just 5-minute highlights of the podcast. So you take 5 minutes talking about a specific topic, 5 minutes talking about your next topic, 5 minutes talking about your next topic, and so on. And now you have 7 days of YouTube videos that you can put on your YouTube channel, and that is a ton of content. You are already getting 7 YouTube videos, 15 micro content videos, a blog post, a Facebook watch party, a Facebook live, Facebook posts every single day, Twitter posts every single day. That's a ton of content. And again, all you've spent is 30 minutes. And finally, an email blast. You guys probably all have email lists. Most business owners do. You might as well, you can send it in an email. You can say, hey, this is what we talked about this week. This is all the places that you can find it. And this is what we feel like is important this week. This is a lot of content for, again, only spending 30 minutes. A lot of business owners say, I don't have the time to focus on social media. I'm telling you right now, you kind of do. You just spend 30 minutes and you can get all of this. I have actually calculated. I kind of went through every single thing that I could think of that you could post that is different from another post. And you can get from one podcast approximately 104 pieces of content. Now, if you think about that, if you did 30 minutes a day, you're already on track with GaryVee. And Gary Vaynerchuk is probably the leader in this. And that's already crazy. Let's say you just do this 4 times a month. You do one podcast a week. That's already 412 pieces of content in 1 month. That's more than one a day, way more than one a day. That's huge. I actually calculated that in a week, in 1 year, that is 5,408 pieces of content. 5,408 pieces of content in a 365-day year is bananas. That's a lot of content. And again, so what I'm trying to convince you of is not only to not just do a podcast. Podcasts are great, but the benefit of why podcasts are specifically what you should focus on. Podcasts are the most time-saving. Again, we go back. They're the most time-saving, and they're easy to do by yourself. And you record 30 minutes once a week, once a month, you get this much content. That's crazy. You're already in the 1% of businesses when it comes to social media. And so I kind of want to come back now. My next point is, let's say you do the podcast for a year. Let's say you do the podcast for a year and you want to move on. You want to do other things. You don't want to spend the 30 minutes, which again, it's not a lot. You probably still should. But let's say you don't want to. You're done. You want to spend your time somewhere else. Once you have, again, if you're doing one podcast a week, 5,408 pieces of content, that's a lot. People aren't going to remember every single thing that you posted. GaryVee, for example, just reposts all the time. Half of his stuff is years and years old, but you don't know because he posts so much. He posts a ton. What I would recommend at this point is just to learn to reduce, reuse, recycle. Spend less time creating the content, more time reusing the content and recycling the content in different ways. First off, posts can go out more frequently. Once you have 5,408 pieces of content, hypothetically, let's say, that's again, in the 365-day year, that's way more every day than one. You can repost things, and posts will go out more frequently. Your business will stay in front of people more frequently. Next, you can fill in the gaps. Let's say there are gaps where there's days that you don't have content. For example, your micro content. You have 15 days of micro content. If you do 2-minute videos, you can fill in the gaps. You can now have 30 days of micro content. You could have 30 days of 3 micro content videos a day, hypothetically. So it continues to grow on itself. And what's amazing is you don't even have to do any extra work. You've already done it all. It's all done. All you're doing is just reposting. And so in that way, it's going to save you a ton of time and a ton of money, because let's say you guys aren't editing for yourselves. You don't have to spend any more money on editors. You don't have to spend any more money on anyone to do anything, because you're just reposting stuff that's already created and no one's going to remember it. Or like, it's all going to feel new again is a better way of saying it. Here's a few companies that actually let you schedule social posts. We use them all the time: Hootsuite, Later, and Loomly. The one that I have the most experience with is Hootsuite, but pretty much all you do is you can put your video or your post up, and you write the copy, and then you just say, hey, I want this to go out once every month, once every 2 months, once every year, on this date at this time. And they will post to your Instagram, your Facebook, your LinkedIn, whatever. And so again, it's doing the work for you. You just record 30 minutes a week, and you can just repost and repost and repost. I have one friend, this is kind of a side, but I have one friend who runs an Instagram account specifically with Hootsuite. And he decided to make it about cars. And it was just a social experiment for him. He was like, I want to see if this works. So he found 300 pictures of exotic cars, and he put them all into Hootsuite to pretty much just throughout the year shuffle each other. And then he literally forgot his password thing run. He was just like, let's just see what happens. And in I think a year, he grew to 350,000 followers on the account, because people don't realize, people like cars, and it just felt new all the time. And he wasn't even doing anything. He was just letting it run. He didn't even have his password. That's the kind of power that reusing content is. He's using it again. So that's where I say, you can save a lot of time right there. And that's where I want to kind of come back to, Gary's quote, to remind everyone, it's not an overnight win. Even if you do all of this stuff and you put out 100 pieces of content every month from one 30-minute podcast, it's not going to be, hey, we did this and we won now and we have a big following. Like he says, what are you here for? Are you here for the sprint? Do you want your money now? And do you want it quickly? And then do you want to just be done? Or do you want the value of your company to, expand and stay with you? And that's the benefit to social media, is people and their attention and the retention of social media and your business is going to continue to grow. And it is going to get people, not only, first off, another side thing to podcast is, it's not only they're going to feel a better connection with you because they hear your voice, they hear what you're talking about, but they're going to feel more passionate about what you do. They're going to enjoy you as a person more, really, just because they know that you're not just trying to sell them. You're giving them free content, free value. And again, it comes back to, too, this is kind of different, but even like Fred was saying, you don't have to do a business thing. You can do any sort of podcast you want. GaryVee, I love the way he does his podcast, because he really doesn't think of his podcast in the same light as many people. His podcast is every single audio thing that he's ever done, he puts on his podcast. Meetings, talking on stage, actual podcast recordings, just interviews that he's done with people. He puts everything up because he thinks of it differently. He thinks of it as more of just like an audio vlog than necessarily a podcast. There's hundreds of episodes where he never even says, hi, welcome to the podcast. It just starts with him being like, yes, I think this and this. So there's not one way to do a podcast. You can do it however you feel like you want to. And that's another huge benefit. But again, don't think of this as an overnight win, but this is going to get your numbers up so much faster than if you were to just post your podcast. And it's going to make your company, first off, kind of look bigger, just because people are going to be like, how are they putting this much content out? But also just, you're going to connect with a potential audience a lot more. And the final thing I want to talk about, this is kind of just because of our current situation. A lot of business owners, when they think of podcasts or social media and content creation, they think, well, I don't want to start until I know I can invest a lot of money into making sure that the quality is good and it's super professional and it looks really good. Cool. Like, that is kind of the norm, but it's not anymore. Because of the quarantine and because of this pandemic going on, the norm for content from anyone is just pretty much a Zoom call. I mean, Jimmy Fallon is recording his show from his living room and a computer. As a business owner, to be able to start out not investing really any money and to have the production value of someone like Jimmy Fallon or someone like Gary Vaynerchuk, who has a whole team, is huge. Now is the time to start, because you're never going to have a time like this again. If you don't start now and people get back to normal, we're going to go back to work sometime. When people go back to normal, their quality is going to go up. And if you're just starting then, it's going to be harder for people to listen to you than it is to listen to someone else. But right now you have the same quality that everyone else does. And so now is the time to start. And then finally, obviously I didn't talk about how to create a podcast. I talked about more why you should and the content that you can get out of just 30 minutes a week, 30 minutes a month. So I wanted to give you guys this for free. It's a course that I made. It's called Podcast 101. And it is literally how to make a podcast down to a T. I go over how to record, the equipment you should buy at different price ranges. I go over how to edit, how to even pick a intro, outro song, how to do all of that, and how to publish, how to get it on iTunes, Spotify, things like that. And actually, it's kind of like a weird Inception thing, but this course is also free on like all podcast apps. And the course is actually me setting up the course as a podcast. So it's kind of like a weird like Inception thing, but you'll actually be able to just watch me walk through how to do it. But you guys can get it totally for free for going to podcastbyjoe.com/podcast 101. The code is NABOE. It is case sensitive, so be careful. But there's a lot of cool stuff in there. It's a 7-module course on recording, editing, publishing, marketing, and then some tips and tricks for new hosts, people that haven't started. And yeah, I think that's it. Finally, if you guys want to work with me at all or get in touch or ask me any questions, feel free. Podcastbyjoe@gmail.com is my current email, and my phone number is on the screen. Everything that I just listed is things that we do for different business owners. We create a ton of content no matter what it is. We do a lot of Facebook Live events for people, and we do a lot of podcasts. We do mobile podcasts where we'll actually go to people with equipment. And then we do, currently we're doing a lot of pandemic stuff and quarantine podcasts through Zoom and things like that. But again, to just reiterate, there's a lot that you can get out of 30 minutes. And your success isn't going to come quick, but it doesn't take a lot to start. And you can really recycle to be at the point of top players like Gary Vaynerchuk in a matter of a month. You'll be competing with someone like him, and that's huge.